Hello guys, welcome back to my channel and enjoy this fanfic part 2. Now let's start the fanfic. 2 months after they had received their swords, Naruto and Fu were sparring with Jiraiya. The pair had raised their skills with taijutsu and kenjutsu to low jonin level and trained with their swords abilities. They had also learned a few new jutsu with their elements as well as a few other techniques such as the shuriken shadow clone jutsu. Naruto had also begun to learn space-time jutsu to follow in his father's footsteps, but it was the same problem that they had with genjutsu. Jiraiya wasn't skilled in that branch of ninja arts aside from the summoning jutsu, and he had made little headway in the art. Their skill with genjutsu had improved and they could now use it in an actual fight, though not to particularly great effect yet. Still, they knew even a weak genjutsu could turn a battle if used correctly and at the right time. Jiraiya blocked Fu's Okibi no Yaiba with his kunai. The two traded blows for a bit before Fu jumped back to avoid an upward slash and lunged forward. Her sword suddenly consumed in fire as she slashed it through the air, unleashing a wave of fire. Jiraiya jumped over the fire and Fu only for Naruto to burst from the ground with an upward slash where he landed. The Toad Sage leaned back, barely avoiding the blade before jumping back and running through hand signs as Naruto charged towards him. Ninja art. Needle Jizo. Jiraiya yelled, his hair transformed into countless sharp needles and encasing him completely. Naruto stabbed at Jiraiya only for the blade to clash against the needle armor. Naruto jumped backwards into the air, recognizing this attack pattern. Ninja art. Hell needles. Countless needles fired from the armor at the blonde, who swiped his sword, creating a gust of wind that blew the needles away. He landed near Fu, who thrust her blade forward as he slashed his. Tempest wind. Searing blaze. Naruto and Fu yelled out, respectively. Naruto's slash created a powerful gust of wind while a stream of fire erupted from Fu's sword, creating a firestorm. Jiraiya cursed at this as he disappeared in the blaze. Naruto and Fu looked on, both knowing they didn't catch the pervert. The blaze cleared to reveal Jiraiya was nowhere in sight. Naruto and Fu skipped back as they detected something beneath them and Jiraiya jumped out of the ground. Earth style. Dark swamp. Jiraiya called out and the ground Naruto and Fu landed on turned to chakra-infused mud. The pair land in the mud and despite their struggles, sink into the ground. Jiraiya smirked as he watched the pair struggle. Hey, looks like it's still too soon for you to face me head on. Jiraiya said, only for his smirk to fade when the two grinned before turning to smoke. Lashing wind. A whirling gust of wind carves a path in the ground towards the Toad Sage from the tree line behind him. Damn. Jiraiya jumped out of the way of the blast, right where the pair wanted him. Jiraiya landed and suddenly, a swarm of insects erupted from the ground and the Toad Sage yelled in shock as he is consumed by the swarm before a blade of wind cut into him and he to burst into smoke. Naruto and Fu looked where the sage once stood as they walked back into the clearing before smiling. Alright, you two, the real Jiraiya said as he approached the pair who turned to him. You win, but don't get cocky just because you beat my shadow clone. Get some rest. Tomorrow, we'll start training you to draw on your Biju's chakra. Take the rest of the day off. That night, Naruto and Fu talked while they sat around a fire at their camp and Fu noticed Naruto had been quiet, thinking about something intensely. Naruto, what's wrong? Fu asked concerned. Huh, what do you mean? Nothing's wrong. Naruto replied with a fake smile, which didn't fool the green-haired girl for a moment. Naruto, I know a fake smile when I see one. She said and his smile faded. What's wrong? Does it have to do with the Kyuubi? Yeah, there's something I haven't told you. Naruto said before telling her as much as he knew about the deaths of his parents. Fu was shocked to hear Naruto was the son of the fourth Hokage and about the deal he made with the Kyuubi. This also intrigued the Nanabi. The Biju could hear and see everything their hosts could, although they could only converse when their host wished it, when asleep, when they felt intense negative emotion or when trying to channel their Biju's chakra. The Biju's feelings on each other, with a few exceptions, ranged from mild distaste to outright hatred, but they recognized each other's power. Though the Nanabe hated the Kyuubi, she also recognized he was much more powerful than her. That the Kyuubi would admit to needing help to kill a human was troubling. So tomorrow, we'll find out who's after us, and I'll find out who's responsible for what happened that night. I see. Hey, Naruto, Fu said, getting his attention, wanting to get his mind off that. I don't think I ever asked, but, what are your friends like? Huh, oh, well, there's Shikamaru, he's the only one of us who made Chunin. He's lazy and he's always complaining about something and would like to watch clouds all day, but he's really smart. There's Kiba, he's louder than I am and acts like he's in charge, but he's really loyal and always has his dog with him. He's an Inuzuka, isn't he? Fu asked. That was one of the clans Jiraiya had made them read about. Yeah. Then there's Ino, she was always thinking about boys and dieting. A fangirl? Fu asked with a slight scowl. Yeah, but she was getting out of it when I left. She always speaks her mind, she's confident and has a kinder side. Then there's Choji, he's an Akamichi so he's fat, but don't call him that, actually, never call any Akamichi that, he's always eating, but he's kind and friendly and knows a lot about food. He went on to briefly describe Iruka, Neji, Lee, Shino, who he didn't know much about but had Fu's interest due to his insects, and Tenten, who he also didn't know much about but felt was worth mentioning. There's Hinata, she's kind and determined, but she's really quiet and she always turns away when I look at her. What do you mean? Fu asked, her eyes narrowing slightly. Well, whenever I look at her, she turns away and blushes. Naruto explained and a look of realization crossed Fu's face. What? Nothing. Fu replied, feeling slightly jealous of the girl. Anyway, then there's Sakura, Naruto said, looking to the ground. She's your teammate, right? The one you like? Fu asked and he nodded. What's wrong? It's just, she likes someone else. You're sure? Fu asked and Naruto began to explain the relationship between them, which led to her asking about Sasuke. To say she was shocked by what she heard would be an understatement. Fu knew of the Uchiha massacre and of the survivors, but didn't know the two were brothers and she was horrified by what Sasuke did to Naruto at the Valley of the End. Naruto, why do you want to save him if he rammed 2 lightning blades through your chest? I understand wanting to save your friend, but it sounds like he wants nothing to do with you or the village. Is it because you made a promise to Sakura? That's part of it, but, what kind of Hokage would I be if I couldn't save one friend? Naruto asked and Fu's eyes widened slightly. I knew, since I first met him, that he was full of hatred. He glared at me, with the same look I got everywhere, but, he wasn't looking at me. He looked at everything like that. But, after we became a team, he changed. He started to open up to me and Sakura and risked his life to protect us. He even once took an hit for me we both thought would kill us. He and my team became like family, he was like a brother to me. But then, Itachi did something to his mind, that and Orochimaru's cursed seal, changed him. I don't care how hard it'll be, I won't abandon my friend. Not only that but, he said and Fu listened intently. I know that if I had ever given in to the glares, the hatred, I could easily have ended up like him. Naruto finished and a melancholy mood fell over both of them, each knowing they could have easily had their lives ruled by hatred too. I understand wanting to save him from living in hatred and loneliness like we used to, but, he's not like us. We lived like that because everyone shunned us. He abandoned those who cared about him and chose to live like that willingly. Fu said sadly. Yeah, but still I can't abandon him. Naruto stated. Naruto, what would you do if he became a threat to Konoha? Fu asked and Naruto's head shot up to look at her. I know what you're going to say, but just consider it. If he became a threat to Konoha, what would you do? You asked me what kind of Hokage would you be if you couldn't save one friend, but look at what happened when Jiraiya and the third Hokage let Orochimaru go. A friend in danger from enemies is one thing, but what kind of Hokage would you be if you failed to protect the lives of your people and comrades trying to save one friend who lost his way or because you were unwilling to stop him when you could have? Naruto looked pensive as he stared into the fire, thinking of what Fu had said. He remembered what Jiraiya had told him. Had he wanted to, Jiraiya could have killed Orochimaru after he left the village, just like he could have killed Sasuke had he not redirected his attack to scratch his forehead protector during their final clash at the Valley of the End. Because the third couldn't kill his ex-student and Jiraiya couldn't kill his former friend, Orochimaru had been free to commit all the crimes and atrocities he has since. Fu gave him a few moments to think about this before she spoke up again. You know, it will probably never be the same even if you do bring him back. I know, Naruto replied, and they were silent for a few moments. He had thought about that a lot recently, and even if Tsunade and Konoha forgave Sasuke for leaving and didn't execute him or lock him up, what would keep him from leaving again? Why do you keep chasing after Sakura, if you know she loves Sasuke? Pervy Sage asked me the same thing. Well, maybe you should move on. Besides, it sounds like she thinks of you like a sibling to me. Maybe. Anyway, it's getting late, we should turn in. Fu said, getting up. She was a little disappointed with how that conversation turned out. She was trying to get his mind off unpleasant things and cheer him up, but it didn't turn out that well. If anything, he had more on his mind now. Still, she knew she had made good points. You go ahead, I'll stay up a while longer. Naruto said. As he thought about it, he realized the girl was right. He had actually thought of this a few times before over the past year. It was somewhat hypocritical to think about how the third and Jiraiya could have stopped Orochimaru when he let Sasuke go for the same reasons. By the time he went to bed, he decided he would do everything he could to bring Sasuke back because right now his only target was his brother, but if he ever went too far or if he ever turned his hatred on Konoha, he would do everything in his power to make him see reason, but if it came down to it, he would have to do what was best for the village, even if it meant breaking his promise to Sakura. He had also long since realized that he and Sakura would likely never be together. Maybe Fu and the pervy sage are right, I still want Sakura to be happy, but I shouldn't give my heart to someone who doesn't feel the same. He was glad Fu was with him. Over the last year, the two had become close friends and she gave him good advice. She rarely tried to tell him what to do and instead usually told him facts, asked questions and let him reach his own conclusions, and she usually knew just what to say. He didn't think anyone understood him better than she did. He stayed up a little longer, thinking about his bonds with Sasuke, Sakura and Fu as well as what he would learn the next day before he got up, put out the fire and went to bed. Naruto and Fu stood before Jiraiya. It was midday in the clearing and the skies were cloudy. Today they would begin training to use the power of their Biju. Alright kids, we're going to start training with your Biju's powers. Well, actually I'll help Fu since the Kyuubi has apparently decided to help Naruto. Jiraiya said. All he would do involving Naruto's training was watch his progress to make sure the Biju wasn't deceiving them and suppress the Kyuubi's chakra if he lost control. Speaking of which, before you start training, Naruto, I want you to talk to the Kyuubi about what happened the night of his attack. Though I'm sure you already plan to. He may be willing to tell you now. I need to know if my hunch was right. Jiraiya said seriously. Alright, who do you think it is, pervy sage? Naruto replied. Madara Uchiha. Jiraiya said grimly, shocking his students. They had read about him in one of the history books Jiraiya had them read, or forced to read in Naruto's case. Madara, but he's one of the founders of Konoha, right? The one who betrayed the village. How could he still be alive? Fu asked. I don't know, but he's the only one I can think of who would have the ability and motive to pull off an attack like that and that the Kyuubi would hate so much but be unable to kill. Alright pervy sage, Naruto said before getting in a meditative position and entering his mindscape. When he opened his eyes, he stood before the cage of the Kyuubi. I was wondering when you would show up, Boy, the Kyubi said as he looked down on his container. It's been over a year since we made the bargain, though I must admit, you've spent your time well. He had to admit that the boy's progression, as well as that of the Nanabe's host, had been impressive, for a human anyway. Yeah, before we get started. I heard your conversation, brat. The sage is correct. The one who broke your mother's seal, who I need you to kill, is indeed Madara Uchiha. Kyubi said, causing Naruto's eyes to widen. But, how is he still alive? There are ways to extend one's life, you should already know that from the snake. Naruto's eyes narrowed, knowing who he is referring to. As for how, I do not know. I too believed he had died fighting your first Hokage until he appeared before me that night. Before I train you, you should tell your friends of this. Like me, the Nanabe is rational, unlike some of our brethren. She will likely agree to help the girl if that man desires us. As much as I hate to admit it, none of us can face that bastard with any hope of success. Before I go, tell me exactly what happened the night I was born. The Kyubi seemed to debate this for a moment. Very well. Kyubi then explained the events of that night as he saw them. How when Naruto was born he was trying to break out of the seal, and that just as the fourth Hokage was going to repair Kushina's seal, Madara, though the Kyubi didn't know who it was at the time, appeared. How he killed the midwives and guards and held Naruto hostage, and how Minato was forced to teleport away to save them when he found explosive tags attached to his blanket. How while he was away Madara had placed Kushina in a seal formation, and soon afterward, the Kyubi fell under his control, and after that it was a blur to the fox demon. The next thing he knew, he was attacking Konoha, and, since they were attacking him, he continued his rampage until the fourth Hokage teleported them both to his safe house and Kushina held him down to be sealed, and after one last attempt to free himself he was sealed by the fourth. Naruto was proud of his father and amazed by his mother. His admiration for them soared when he heard his mother was able to hold down something as powerful as the Kyubi in the condition she was in, and that their last act saved his life. On the other hand, his hatred for the ancient Uchiha reached an all-new high. That he used him as a hostage, when he was a newborn, showed that the man was pure evil. Why did you continue to attack Konoha when you were released from Madara's control? Kyubi smirked. To put it simply, it was fun. Naruto scowled. That aside, I was being attacked. I retaliated. The Kyubi explained, and Naruto looked slightly surprised. So, if they weren't attacking, you would have left? Naruto asked incredulously. It was hard to believe that the Kyubi, who he had been told was and had so far proven himself to be a mass of hate and destruction, would just leave. Perhaps. It was amusing, and I have destroyed and killed simply because I've felt like it, and I feel no remorse or pity, but I have better things to do with my time than wipe out a pathetic village. Kyubi responded. Now go. Return when you are ready to train. When Naruto opened his eyes to find Fu and Jiraiya looking at him. Both wished to know if Jiraiya's assumption was right. If it was, they may have to up their training. Good to see you're back, so. Jiraiya said. You were right, pervy sage. Naruto replied, looking at the ground with narrowed eyes. Fu's eyes widened and Jiraiya's narrowed. It was Madara. Naruto then began to explain what the fox told him. Fu felt sorry Naruto lost his parents in such a way, and Jiraiya was once again kicking himself for not being there and promising himself he wouldn't fail his new students like he did his sensei, Minato, Kushina, and the trio from AIM. Kyubi said the Nanabe might help you. He said she won't want to fight Madara any more than he would. Wouldn't surprise me. It's not exactly smart to fight an opponent who can control you at will. Jiraiya said. You ready, Fu? Fu nodded before she too entered her mindscape. Fu found herself in her mindscape, a dark cave with dripping stalactites standing before a large cage. Inside was an enormous blue armored beetle with 6 wing-like tails, along with a 7th normal tail coming out of the end of its abdomen. So, Madara is alive, and likely the leader of this, Akatsuki. To think he survived all these years. Nanabe said, still surprised. You met him? Fu asked. No, but I am aware of him and his abilities. Kyuubi is right, loath as I am to admit that and that I must do this, but I will help you. I can have no true freedom so long as Madara lives and I cannot face him myself. Fu looked surprised. She hadn't really expected her to help. Return to your friends and inform them you have my aid. Nanabe instructed. After Fu gave the news to Naruto and Jiraiya, the pair returned to their Biju. They found that training to use their chakra was much more difficult than everything else they had done so far. Calling on the chakra wasn't really that hard, especially after Jiraiya loosened Naruto's seal. What was hard was controlling themselves once they entered their tailed states, and the less control they had, the more the chakra damaged them. Worse still, channeling large amounts of their Biju's chakra, enough to enter the one-tailed state, poisoned and crippled their clones, ensuring they wouldn't be able to train in anything else and had to focus exclusively on their tenant's chakra. Still, with their Biju willingly, albeit begrudgingly, helping them, they made good progress. 2 months after beginning their training, they could enter the two-tailed state at will and control themselves. They began to lose control at 3 tails and were warned they would lose control at 4 for now. However, they found even though they had control, the chakra still poisoned their clones, crippling them and at high enough levels dispelling them. Their Biju informed them that unless they gained full control, which they didn't tell them how to do, just that they weren't ready, this effect would continue. They could, however, still use clones with their initial Jinchuriki forms. Jiraiya later informed them, much to their horror, that they would have to defeat their Biju within their mindscape in order to completely control their power, but that there was something they had to do beforehand if they were to have any hope of winning, but he didn't know what that requirement was. After another month, they increased their control to the 3rd tail and could remain somewhat in control in their 4-tailed state. Well, they could tell friend from foe anyway. Luckily for Jiraiya, who knew that even he would have trouble against those forms without Sage Mode. They had been told by their Biju that their current 4-tailed states were actually a second version of their chakra cloaks, and they automatically transformed into them because of their lack of control. The pair stood before Jiraiya in another clearing next to a river. Their Biju chakra training had pretty much destroyed the area they had been training in until now. Jiraiya had gotten out a sealing scroll for reasons they didn't yet know. Okay, kids, say goodbye because you won't be seeing each other for the next 2 months. Jiraiya said, shocking the pair. What are you talking about, pervy sage? Where are we going? Naruto asked. It's about time you get better acquainted with your summons and what they can do, so you and I will be spending the next 2 months with the toads while Fu learns from the chameleons. Jiraiya explained. In addition to allowing us to summon them, summoning contracts allow them to summon us to their home. So, once you've said your goodbyes, I want you to summon messengers and tell them about our plans. After that, they'll reverse summon us to their homes. Okay, Fu said as she turned to Naruto. Well, guess I'll see you in 2 months. Fu said sadly. Naruto smiled somewhat sadly at her. Don't worry about it. These 2 months will be over before you know it. Fu returned Naruto's smile. Besides, I'm sure we'll learn a lot of awesome techniques. Yeah, you're right, Fu said. You ready? Naruto nodded. All right then, go ahead. Jiraiya said, and the two made the hand signs. Summoning jutsu. The pair slammed their hands to the ground, and in puffs of smoke, a fairly large, by normal standards, light green toad and brown chameleon appeared. What's up? The chameleon asked. I need you two to contact the great toad sages and the head of the chameleons. Jiraiya said. I want my 2 students here to learn how to use your abilities and work with you, so I want them to train with you guys for the next 2 months. Jiraiya explained, and the summons nodded. Now, if I'm not mistaken, there should be a portal in the chameleon's forest that leads to the land of Nex, like the toads have a portal that leads to Konoha, that right? Jiraiya asked the chameleon. Yeah, since the country and the Kubasaki clan have been destroyed, I guess we'll connect it to your village later, but for now, yes, the portal leads to the land of Nex. Good. Okay, that's all. Jiraiya said, and the 2 summons nodded and vanished. Jiraiya then walked to Fu and handed her the scroll. Alright, Fu, This scroll contains instructions on what I want you to do while you're with the chameleons, some techniques, knowledge of sealing arts, and a map with the place and time we'll meet. Okay, so Fu began before she disappeared in a poof of smoke. Naruto's eyes widened, but before he could say anything, he and Jiraiya vanished as well. When Naruto opened his eyes, he and Jiraiya were in a breathtaking mountain range with a rich and beautiful land. So, your little Jiraiya's new pupil said an old male toad standing before him. Huh, who are you, Grandpa Toad? Naruto asked, and the toad chuckled at the name. And why are you calling pervy sage, little? Jiraiya grimaced when the toad heard Naruto refer to him like this. The toad laughed when he heard this. Pervy sage. That fits him perfectly, the toad said, still laughing. Naruto, be mindful of who you're speaking to. This is Fukusaku, the head of the toads and the one who taught me the sage arts. Jiraiya scolded a shocked Naruto. He reminds me a lot of you when you were young, little Jiraiya. Fukusaku said with a smile. Though he lacks your perverted side. You're the one who taught pervy sage, huh? Hey, what are sage arts anyway? Well, it's a little early to teach you and you don't really fit the requirements yet, but there's no harm in explaining them to you. Fukusaku replied before he began to explain senjutsu to Naruto. At the same time, Fu reappeared in a lush forest brimming with insect life, standing before Shiromari. It's been a long time, Fu. So, Riku tells me you wish to train with us for a while, the chameleon boss said. Yeah, for the next 2 months. How've you been? Good, thank you again for allowing me to finally return to my family. So, what can you tell me about you guys and what can I learn from you? Daichi didn't really know much. I've been told the two you've been traveling with have the toad contract. Well, we don't have anything like their senjutsu, but we can teach you some unique jutsu, how to imitate our camouflage abilities and how to work with us and use our abilities. Shiromari said. 3 days into his training, Naruto was laying on his back staring at the night sky. He had been amazed by what he learned of Sage Mode and Senjutsu, though they didn't start teaching him yet. Surprisingly enough, he understood what they were talking about without them having to dumb things down or create analogies. He had to admit, Jiraiya's insistence on having his clones read and memorize all those books was paying off. He knew that before that, a lot of what Fukusaku said would have completely gone over his head. He had also thought of ways to use the wind-like Sage Mode manipulated natural energy and thought up a few new techniques based on the idea. These ideas were only possible due to their training with their elements with those 5-pronged seals. While there, he had a reunion with Gamakichi, Gamatatsu, and Gamabunta, and they and Fukusaku had told him of some of the toad's other abilities. At the moment, he was wondering how Fu was doing with the chameleons. He found himself missing her more than he thought he would, more than he did Sakura. When he thought about it, he enjoyed being around her more than he did Sakura, too. Hey, kid, what are ya doing out here by yourself? Gamakichi asked. He was probably Naruto's best friend among the toads. He had grown a lot since Naruto last saw him, now being about 4 feet tall. Huh, oh, nothing, just thinking. About that girl you've been traveling with? Gamakichi asked with a smirk. What? No. Heh, yeah right. But I thought that pink-haired girl was your main squeeze. Yeah, well, she likes someone else so. Naruto trailed off sadly. Ah, man, that's rough. Gamakichi said. Anyway, what do you think of that girl? Huh, well, she's been through the same things I have and I like spending time with her. Actually, I think I might like being around her more than Sakura. That's so. Gamakichi smirked. Wait, you mean she's a Jinchuriki? Huh, that's interesting. So, what were you thinking about? It's nothing. Just forget about it. Over the next 2 months, the Jinchuriki met many of the toads and chameleons and learned their specific abilities and how to work with them and use their abilities as well as collaborative techniques. Naruto also had the misfortune of being invited to Ma and Pa for dinner. Jiraiya wisely made an excuse and got out of going himself. Fu learned to imitate the chameleon's camouflage abilities, though even with half her clones focusing on it, it took her a month. Like the chameleons, she could completely hide her presence, though sensors and dojutsu users could still find her. She had also found some unique species of insects in the chameleon's forest. Thanks to the Nanabi, unlike the Aburame and Kamizuru clans, she wasn't limited to one species of insect, and she took 2 of those species into her body in addition to the chakra-eating beetles she already had. As Jiraiya's scroll instructed, the clones that weren't helping her learn to work with the chameleons and use their abilities were mainly focusing on water jutsu. Fu discovered that, after training with that 5-pronged seal for 5 months, she was able to pull water out of the moisture in the air for her jutsu, though it was easier to use bodies of water. Naruto found that, thanks to his skill with wind chakra control, he could use some of his sword's abilities, such as creating wind blades, without it. All their other skills showed normal improvement. Jiraiya also made sure Naruto's strategic skills had improved and that he understood what it meant to lead a mission and beat him into the ground some more to increase his combat experience and his ability to read his opponent's moves. In addition, the pair began to learn sealing jutsu. Naruto under Jiraiya and Fu from Jiraiya's instructions and books on the art included in the scroll the pervert had given her. However, the pair found this to be the hardest thing they had learned next to controlling their tenant's powers. They got basic seals like standard storage seals rather easily, but Fu had trouble after that. Naruto had a natural talent for it, not surprising given his heritage, but it was still difficult for him even with his shadow clones. Today was the day they got back together. Naruto and Jiraiya had been summoned by one of the stronger toads just outside Konoha about a week ago and had made their way to their meeting place, a clearing he selected in the Land of Fire just outside the border of the Land of Rivers. As they walked into the clearing, they found Fu sitting on a stone looking in their direction. Her insects had alerted her to their approach. "Took you long enough," Fu said with a smirk as she got off the rock and walked to the 2. "Good to see you. I missed you guys." "Same here, Fu," Naruto said with a smile. After their reunion was over, they explained what they had learned to each other. 2 days later, Naruto and Fu were sparring in a clearing by a river. Their clones were training as usual down the river. Both were wearing Jiraiya's 4 limbs weighting seals. The sun was beginning to set and they were just about done for the day, the weight seal beads on their arms already red and ready to come off. Both their taijutsu styles relied on the speed they had gained while training with the weight seals, but Naruto's focused on strength whereas Fu used her flexibility to gracefully avoid attacks and counter, not that her blows weren't strong too. The 2 traded blows for a while. Naruto was more skilled at taijutsu, but Fu's style gave her the advantage. While he blocked most of Fu's attacks and this was wearing him down, Fu dodged his attacks. Naruto was on the ropes. The spar ended when Fu ducked under a punch and grabbed his arm. Fu flipped him over her shoulder. Naruto landed on his back and Fu pinned him to the ground, sitting on his waist. "Looks like I win, Naruto," Fu said with a smirk. "Yeah, but, can you get up?" Naruto asked with a blush. Fu looked confused before she realized how she had positioned herself and jumped back with a blush of her own. Before either had a chance to break the awkward silence, they heard footsteps and saw Jiraiya walk out of the tree line, having seen the whole thing, with a smirk. Didn't expect you 2 to move so fast," Jiraiya said. It's not like that, Ero-sensei," Fu said, her blush deepening. "Yeah, stop thinking like, what the?" Naruto yelled the last part as he saw something in the river out of the corner of his eye. "You're going to have to better than that to distract me, kid," Jiraiya said. "I'm not trying to, you old perv. There's someone in the river," Naruto shouted as he ran to the river. Jiraiya and Fu looked to the river in shock and saw what he had seen, 3 men floating in the river unconscious. What the hell? 10 minutes later, the 3 had been looked over. Jiraiya decided it was a good time to test what they had learned about the local herbs and first aid from their readings, and they had done a fairly good job of patching the three up, though Fu proved better at it. After they got up, they told the three men their names. "Thanks, you may have saved our lives," one of the men said. "You're welcome. So, who are you guys anyway? And how did you wind up in the river?" Naruto asked, and was surprised to see his question dampened their spirits. After a moment, one of the men spoke up. "My name is Rokusuke and we're miners from Katabami, a village in the land of rivers. I know you just saved our lives, but, please, I beg you to help us again. You have to help us get to Konohagakure." "Katabami?" Jiraiya asked with a raised brow. "Oh yeah, that village with the gold mine. Why are you in such a hurry to Konoha? Is there trouble?" "Our village has been taken over by a gang called the Kurosuke family. They force us to work the mine regardless of our health, the weather. We're basically slaves," Rokusuke said. "I see," the sage said. "If you understand, then please, we have to get to Konoha quickly. Kanpachi is." "Rokusuke, come on. It hurts, but by now he's gotta be," one of the men said sadly as he placed his hand on Rokusuke's shoulder. "What happened to him?" Fu asked. "The leader of the Kurosuke family, Raiga, has funerals for everyone who displeases him," one of the other men said, his eyes downcast as funerals for friends passed before his eyes. "He buries them alive and then cries over them as if they were a close friend." The teen ninja were shocked and scandalized by this. Jiraiya's eyes narrowed. In his long career, he had seen worse things happen to innocent people. Of course, his teammate had been Orochimaru. The whole situation reminded Naruto of the Land of Waves. "We managed to escape when he was holding one of these funerals for our friend, but by now." "That's terrible. Sounds like this guy's crazy." "Wait, Raiga Kurosuke?" Naruto asked. Jiraiya had him and Fu memorize Konoha's bingo book and a few others versions of the bingo book not distributed in ninja villages during their readings, and he recognized the name. He had to admit it was a good idea as he recalled the hapless fools who picked a fight with Jiraiya, not recognizing him until they heard his name. "Yeah, how do you know him?" he asked, a little fearful. They didn't seem the type, but if they were somehow affiliated with him, they were screwed. Then they noticed Naruto's forehead protector. "Wait, you three are from Konoha?" "Yeah, we're on a training trip under Jiraiya of the Sannin," Naruto said, gesturing to Jiraiya. He didn't use his nickname for the pervert because he thought it wouldn't inspire much confidence from the three. Had the situation been different, Jiraiya would have smirked at being called something other than pervy sage by the blonde. "To answer your question, we recognize him from the bingo book," Fu explained. Bingo books are books that, in general, list dangerous ninja. Raiga is an A- class missing nin from Kurigakure, the second highest level of ninja, and he has a 20 million ryo bounty on his head. He's also a former member of the 7 Ninja Swordsmen of the Mist, a group made of the greatest sword-wielding ninja in Kiri. The three were shocked to hear how high Raiga's bounty was. "Huh. We can't very well just leave them like this," Jiraiya said. "So kids, what do ya say? How about we help them out?" His apprentices smiled confidently and nodded. "Are you crazy? You can't take him on by yourselves," Rokusuke said. "Listen, remember when Fu here said Raiga was the second highest level? Well, I'm an S-class ninja, the highest class. Trust me when I say I can handle anything he and his group can throw at me," Jiraiya said, and the trio of miners' eyes widened when they heard this. "Let's use this to see how you've improved. I'll watch over the mission and, if things go south, I'll be there to bail you out." "Sound good. You got it. You guys ready to go? We've got a village to save," Naruto said with a grin. A day later, the group was walking down a path in a forest towards the village of Katabami. As they went, they were told more of the conditions the Kurosuke clan put them in, and Rokusuke constantly complaining about the speed they traveled at. It seemed he was still holding out hope that their friend was alive even after being buried for so long, but his friends were more realistic and tried to make him see the truth. It was near sunset when they walked out of the forest and saw a curry shop by the side of the road. What's this? Curry of Life shop? Huh. We can use that as our base. Let's see if we can spend the night here and get to business in the morning. Jiraiya said as they came to the shop and entered. An old woman who was cleaning the counter looked up when they walked in. Well, it's been a while since anyone's come here. I'm Sancho. Welcome, please, take a seat. Would you like me to fix you something or you just want to rest a bit? The woman said with a smile. Thanks. I think we'd all like a bite to eat. How about the house special? Jiraiya asked. Sure, I'll have some of my special curry ready in a minute. Sancho replied as she turned to a cooking pot. A few minutes later, they were all seated at two tables, Jiraiya and his students at one and the miners at another. Before them each was a glass of water with a spoon. So, that mountain we saw was the Katabami gold mine? Naruto asked. That's right. So, what do you plan to do? Well, tomorrow, we'll scout out the village, try to get an idea how many enemies there are, their positions and level, that kind of thing, then we'll come up with a plan of attack. Naruto said. He really is a bit more mature. The old Naruto would probably have wanted to just charge in head first, thinking everything would turn out okay. Jiraiya thought to himself with a grin. Just then, Sancho walked to their tables with trays. Here you are. It's my specialty. The curry of life. The old woman said as she placed their plates on their tables. The sauce was black and bubbled, obviously spicy to an extreme. The group looked down at the curry before Naruto. Fu and the miners turned to Jiraiya and glared at him slightly. What are you all looking at me for? Jiraiya asked as he noticed the glares. Isn't it obvious? Fu asked. You're the one who ordered this. Naruto said. Yes, well, let's just eat. We don't want to seem ungrateful. Jiraiya said, obviously not too pleased either, and the others reluctantly nodded before they all took a spoonful of the curry and slowly took their first bites, then all their faces turned bright red and their eyes bulged. Seconds later, screams of pain could be heard outside the shop. Everyone was paralyzed by the intense spices for a moment before the ninja recovered and quickly grabbed their glasses and drank half the water in one gulp, gasping for breath afterwards. The miners still hadn't recovered. Wow, that's some curry, Jiraiya said to their host. Why thank you, it's famous around these parts. I remember the last Konoha ninja who came through here. He collapsed from exhaustion, but one spoonful of my curry and he was wide awake. Sancho replied with a smile. Yeah, I'll bet, Naruto said. I don't think anyone could sleep through that. So, you're here by yourself. You don't have anyone to help out around here. Naruto said, thinking about using his shadow clones to help out. It might save them a bill, not that they couldn't pay, and it would be nice to help out the old woman. Sancho looked down sadly. Well, I do have a son, Karashi, but he went off to join that Kurosuke family, she said sadly as she closed her eyes, thinking of her son. I shouldn't have pushed him, always telling him to be strong and to stand up for himself. What, are you saying he just left you here to worry about him? Fu was surprised. The jerk. Don't worry Grandma Sancho, we'll get him back for you. Naruto said. Oh, you don't need to trouble yourselves. It's no trouble. We're here to take care of these guys anyway, so it's not like we'll be going out of our way or anything. Naruto replied and the shop owner smiled. Thank you, young man. You can stay here the night, free of charge if you like. Sancho said. That night, Naruto and Jiraiya stayed in one room while the miners slept in another and Fu had her own room. Naruto was sitting on his bed and Jiraiya was looking out the window, both slightly tense. Something told them something was off. In her room, Fu had a similar feeling. Suddenly, the three heard loud footsteps down the hall. This is terrible, shouted one of the miners just before he opened the door to Naruto and Jiraiya's room. Rokusuke's gone. He must have headed to town on his own. Fu threw open the door of her own room when she heard this. Damn, at this rate, he'll get himself killed. So much for strategy. If we take our time now, he's dead. Naruto said as he stood up. Let's go. We need to hurry. Fu said. Rokusuke ran towards the village, intent on digging up his friend. Hoping against all odds that he had somehow survived all this time. Unbeknownst to him, he was sensed by Raiga's partner, Renmara, as Raiga stood on a cliff overlooking the town. Someone's coming, Raiga, Renmara said from his place on the swordsman's back. A pity, it seems we'll have to hold another funeral. Raiga said sadly, sniffling a bit at the end. It was early morning when Rokusuke finally made it to his village. The sun had barely begun to rise. He snuck in as quietly as he could and was trying to dig his friend out. He sat there at his grave on his knees, his hands bruised from digging, but he didn't care. Hang on, Kanpachi, I'll get you out. Rokusuke said. Need a hand? A voice asked. Rokusuke looked up and saw he was surrounded by 7 black cloaked and hooded figures. He yelled out in shock and fell back, knowing there was no escape. Naruto and Fu rushed towards the village. Fu was cursing herself for not placing an insect on the man to track him. They had both seen the way he was acting, although they thought he would be smarter than this, she should have taken a precaution. As they ran through the forest, Fu sent out a wave of insects ahead of them to collect whatever information they could before they arrived. They reached the village a few minutes later and looked down to see a group of villagers being forced into harsh labor while 4 black-cloaked men, members of the Kurosuke family as they had been described, watched over them. Their eyes narrowed as they saw these people. Like the miner had told them, they were basically slaves, they had little to no rights. While they watched, several of Fu's insects flew to her and she held up her hand and allowed them to land on her arm. How many are there? Naruto asked and Fu paused for a moment as the insect relayed all the information it had gathered to her. There are a total of 14 spread throughout the town. 9 of them are together, those 4 down there and 1 off by himself. Most of them have low Chunin level chakra, 1 has less than the average genin, that's probably Karashi, and the 1 on his own has mid-jonin level reserves. That 1 must be Raiga. Fu said, frowning as the insect informed her of something odd. But, there's a second chakra signature on Raiga. What do you mean? Naruto asked with narrowed eyes. It's like there's someone strapped to his back under his cloak. Fu responded. Before either could ponder the meaning of this, their eyes widened as an old man who was being forced to work was suddenly unable to stand anymore. He fell over and all the raw ore he was carrying was spilled on the ground. The 4 thugs surrounded and threatened old man with a funeral if he didn't pick up the ore and get back to work. Alright, looks like that's our cue. Let's try to take these 4 out as quietly as we can. Naruto said and Fu nodded before they each made a hand sign and created a single shadow clone. The now 4 teens then traveled underground with a jutsu. The 4 thugs watched with smirks, some laughing as the man frantically gathered the spilled ore before their eyes widened as 4 pairs of hands shot out of the ground and grabbed their ankles. They didn't even have time to cry out in shock before they were pulled deep underground, where they were covered in and drained dry of chakra by Fu's insects, their cries muffled by the ground. The old man looked where the men stood in disbelief for a few moments before Naruto, Fu, their clones and the unconscious criminals emerged from the ground in front of him. Okay, tie these guys up and cover their mouths. Naruto ordered the clones as he threw them some rope. You alright, old man? You, what have you done? The man said fearfully. They'll give me a funeral for sure. Don't worry, we'll take care of them. Fu said before they all looked up as they heard a gong. What's that? Did we set off an alarm? Naruto asked. No, it's a summon, they're calling us to a funeral. The old man said. A funeral, do you think? Naruto asked Fu. Rokusuke. Fu said. She then mentally called out to her insects, calling one back for an update. Yes, I heard they captured him this morning. The last 9 members of the gang should be over there. Fu said. What about Raiga? Naruto asked as the insect returned and she reached out her hand and let it land on her finger. He's not there, he must still be off on his own somewhere. Fu replied. Alright, come on. Let's save this guy and take out all of the underlings while we're at it. Naruto said, and Fu nodded before Naruto turned to their clones. You two make sure these guys don't do anything funny. Raiga looked down on the funeral from a cliff. He loved funerals, they brought people together in mourning and remembrance. I remember when I first met Rokusuke, it's a happy memory. Raiga said. Is it? Renmara asked. Yes, I remember the smile he gave when we liberated the gold mine, that's how I'll always remember him. Raiga replied as tears fell from his eyes. Will you hold a nice funeral for me too? Don't talk like that, you're not going to die. Besides, I don't need a funeral to recall all the good times we've shared. Raiga, they're coming. Good, I want to see who he brought to rescue him. Raiga said as he wiped the last of his tears away. There are 3 of them, one of them seems to be watching, be careful, Raiga. Renmara warned. Even Jiraiya couldn't hide from his abilities. Don't worry, I will, after all, you'll be there with me. Naruto and Fu arrived to see the group of thugs in a large graveyard digging a grave for Rokusuke. They frowned as they watched them prepare to bury the man alive and thought that all these graves marked where someone suffered the same fate. Already having a plan, the two created 4 shadow clones each. The Jinchuriki and 3 of their clones then spread out silently using Earth-style underground move jutsu. After moving into position, they waited a few more moments before making their move. Several of the thugs chuckled to themselves as they dug the newest grave before they sensed something. They turned to see a pair of teens rushing them. They charged to meet them and were shocked when everyone who met the 3 ahead of the group were all defeated in seconds. They were weak by ninja standards, many genin could defeat them, but it was still more than enough to subdue a village of civilians. One jumped to the side to avoid an axe kick from Fu only to suddenly be finding a whip of water wrapped around his waist and arms. He barely had time to voice his surprise before electricity flowed through the water and he was shocked into unconsciousness. Another was suddenly blasted away by a powerful ball of wind. 2 more clones came out of the ground in between them, separating the remaining criminals. The thugs were quickly dealt with. In under a minute they were all on the ground unconscious. Huh, that was easy. Naruto said. They had decent reserves, but they were poorly trained. Fu observed. Alright, you guys get Rokusuke out of there. The clones all ran towards the coffin the miner was locked in. As they did, Naruto looked over at the last remaining gang member standing. He was using a grave marker to shield himself. So, I'm guessing you're Sancho's son, Karashi. Fu said as she looked at the young man. Huh, yeah, what of it? Karashi asked, crossing his arms and acting tough now that they weren't hostile. How can you just leave that nice old lady alone like that? Do you know how much she's worried about you? Naruto frowned at him. So what? Besides, their leader is a great man, he liberated this village. What's your definition of liberating? Fu asked. This is basically slavery. How can you work for these people? Because now I'm part of something powerful. Really? So are you strong now? You hid behind your allies and let them do all the fighting for you. Naruto said. Either you're still weak, or deep down you know this is wrong. Karashi looked up at him. Besides, if you really want to be strong, then you need to be able to stand up for yourself. And what is it you plan to do with that strength? Do you really want to be strong at a cost like this? What if your mother did something to anger Raiga? Would you just stand by and let them bury her too? Karashi knew they were right, but he was still too afraid to go against the Kurosuke or try to stand on his own. He decided to act like he had truly seen the error of his ways and see which way the wind blew. You're right, I've been a fool. Please, forgive me. Karashi begged. Fine. Naruto said as his and Fu's clones walked to them with Rokusuke. Both saw through Karashi but knew he wasn't strong enough to really do anything. Alright, you guys know the drill. Tie them up, stay here and watch over them. Rokusuke, you alright? Yeah, thanks for saving my life again. I'm sorry but I just couldn't leave my friend buried alive like that. Rokusuke said. I understand. For what it's worth, I'm sorry we couldn't save him. Fu said and the miner nodded. I shouldn't have to tell you to stay here. The green-haired girl then walked over and looked around before looking up at a cliff. That's all of them, all that's left is Raiga. Good. Then let's finish this. Naruto said as they moved at ninja speed up the cliff, leaving behind the miner, the thugs, the wannabe and their clones. Naruto and Fu arrived at the top of the cliff and looked around. They were on a rocky plateau and seemed to be alone. Do you know where he is? Not yet. Fu replied. She sent a command to her insects to return an update on Raiga's position. Suddenly, a thick mist appeared out of nowhere. I know this, it's the hidden mist jutsu. Naruto said as he looked around. Fu nodded, having read about the technique and sent out a swarm of her insects. Raiga looked down on them from a ledge overlooking the plateau, observing the two teens that had decimated his gang. What do you think, Renmara? It's incredible. They have enormous chakra reserves. One of them seems to be manipulating insects. My illusions won't work on them. Renmara said. I see. Are you ready, Renmara? Yes, Raiga. Fu had called back one of the insects that had managed to land on Raiga when she sent them out. She looked up at the nearby cliff. Up there, Fu said, pointing to the cliff. Got it. Wind style. Great breakthrough. Naruto called out before he unleashed a gust of wind that blew away the mist and tore across the plateau towards Raiga. Raiga skipped backwards and focused chakra to his feet to anchor himself to the ground. He held up his arms to shield his face as the blast of wind hit. Raiga grunted with effort as he channeled as much chakra as he could to keep from being blown away. While he and Renmara had been talking about Rokusuke's funeral and watching the following events, the insects Fu had tagged him with, 12 in total and 10 still remaining, had been draining his chakra. While such a small amount of the bugs could only do so much, they had been working on Raiga for a while now. Naruto and Fu kicked off as fast as they could towards the cliff and quickly ran up to where Raiga stood as the mist began to cover the area again, drawing their swords as they went. Naruto reached the top first, jumped into the air and came down with a downward slash meant to cut Raiga in half. Raiga brought his blades, covered in bandages, together in an X formation to block and channeled lightning through them as Naruto channeled wind through his. The blades met with a clang and the two stood their ground. You seem strong, and your eyes show such determination. Raiga said. I may hold a funeral for you after this is over. You're the one who's going to need a funeral, pal. Naruto said before the both jumped back. Naruto slashed his sword repeatedly, creating 3 blades of wind but was shocked when he heard a young voice predict his movements and warn Raiga, who then easily dodged his attacks. Raiga, behind you. The voice called out and Raiga spun around to block a flame-covered slash from Fu. Fu summoned a water blade to her left hand while holding Okibi no Yaiba in her right and mimicked Raiga, canceling the fire and channeling lightning through her swords, and the two clashed in a fierce exchange of swordplay. Fu had a speed advantage, but Raiga's ally predicted her every move and warned him, allowing him to dodge each strike before Naruto joined the fray. Raiga quickly found himself outmatched trying to fight the pair together. He channeled as much chakra into his legs as he could and jumped back. After about a dozen feet before he impaled his Kiba blades into the ground, not only to slow him down but also to prepare an attack. Lightning Funeral. Feast of Lightning. Raiga yelled before a wave of lightning bolts cut through the ground towards them. Naruto countered with a slash of his Hishotaichi, unleashing his Tempest Wind attack. The whirlwind tore across the ground and dispersed the lightning. Fu slashed her sword, creating several dragons of fire as Naruto charged forward. The dragons twisted around him and flew towards Raiga. As Raiga dodged the first two, the third reared up and dive-bombed him and he jumped back to dodge. Raiga, he's right in front of you using the flames as cover. Renmara warned and Raiga brought his swords together. Ninja Art. Lightning Ball. Raiga yelled and he threw a ball of pure lightning at the blonde. The ball hit as Naruto came out of the remnants of the fire and electrocuted him. He's a clone. Renmara yelled and Naruto turned to smoke. To your right. Renmara warned, and Raiga turned to see a twisting cyclone carving a path towards him. He jumped to the side and Naruto lunged forwards, intent on impaling the man. Raiga blocked with his left blade and attacked with used his right to attack with a stab of his own. Without Fu's aid, Naruto quickly found himself on the defensive as Raiga's two swords gave him an advantage. Raiga went for a downward slash but had to disengage and jump back to dodge another fire dragon before being attacked from two sides from Naruto and Fu. He dodged a stab aimed at his stomach from Fu and blocked a slash from Naruto. However, Naruto followed up that slash with a kick that Raiga barely managed to dodge. Unfortunately for the swordsman, the kick hit the bag on Raiga's back and Renmara was sent flying. Raiga! Renmara called out. Renmara! Raiga yelled, worried about his only friend. Without Renmara's aid and now running dangerously low on chakra, he was now at a serious disadvantage and was quickly overwhelmed by Naruto and Fu's combined swordplay. Fu covered her blade with flame and slashed downwards at Raiga, who blocked with both his blades, leaving him open to a upward diagonal slash from Naruto. He skipped backwards but suffered a shallow cut across his stomach and chest from Naruto's sword. Fu sheathed her sword and made a hand sign, creating three shadow clones who threw shuriken as they drew their swords and charged. Do you really think that will help you? Raiga yelled, enraged at the loss of Renmara as he deflected the projectiles. Renmara, hang on. I'll come and get you as soon as I'm finished here. Raiga blocked a slash from a clone when the clone he had locked blades with smirked. Before he could react, the three clones exploded, sending him flying back and leaving him wide open as Naruto lunged forward. Don't! Renmara yelled, but it was too late and Naruto impaled Raiga through the chest. Raiga coughed up blood and looked weakly at his opponent. I guess, I'll be the one needing the funeral after all, Raiga said as he coughed up more blood. Hey, please, take care of Renmara. These were the swordsman's last words. His body went limp as he said them and he breathed his last, his swords falling to the ground. Naruto and Fu looked at the man, slightly remorseful. Both of them had realized whoever was helping him was likely a close friend. Naruto created a clone, ordered it to seal up the body and the swords in two separate scrolls before he and Fu walked over to where Renmara lay on the ground in a bag. Fu's insects swarmed around the bag, ready to attack if whoever was inside proved hostile. So, this is who was helping Raiga. He must have a dojutsu. Naruto said as he walked over. Fu nodded and she unzipped the bag, revealing the boy. You're the one who was helping him? Fu asked, surprised to see he was so young, but what truly surprised them was the look in the boy's eyes. A look they had seen in their own, a look of someone who had no meaning in their life. Someone with no reason to live. Yes, we were together, since that day, Renmara began before he told them of how he had met Raiga. That day, Naruto asked, I lived in a village, in a shabby cabin. I've always been frail and I have no memory of my parents. I survived only because the other villagers took pity on me and left me food. But even though I was so weak, I had a power no one else had. My eyes allowed me to see the outside world, but when they found out about that power, they stopped helping me. I would have starved to death, had it not been for Raiga. One day, he and a group of Anbu came to the village in search of a traitor. With my eyes I saw him, crying. He, too, had no meaning in his life. He took pity on me and took me with him. From that day forward, I was his eyes and he was my arms and legs. We've always been together ever since. But now that he's gone, my life has no meaning. The Jinchuriki's eyes widened as they heard this. Naruto was reminded of Haku, the boy who had put him on his path and taught him what was truly important. You have a job, don't you? Please, finish it. You can't be serious. Fu said. Renmara, I knew someone just like you once. Naruto said sadly. Ironically enough, he also helped one of the 7 swordsmen. Fu remembered hearing this before. He was Zabuza's apprentice Haku. He saw himself as nothing but a tool and thought that, once his usefulness to Zabuza was outlived, his life would lose all meaning. When I beat him and he thought he wasn't strong enough to remain Zabuza's tool, he asked me to kill him. Then you've already heard this before. I can't go on alone, without a purpose. Renmara said, looking up to the sky. Is that what Raiga would want? Naruto asked and Renmara turned to him. Renmara, both of us know what that's like. Fu said. We were both shunned in our villages for reasons we had no control over. Almost no one cared about us. Most people just wanted us gone. We had nothing to live for, until we found people who understood and accepted us. Renmara, Raiga's last words were to ask us to make sure you lived on. If you don't want to continue living for yourself, do it for him. But, I can't go on alone like this. Then find new people who accept you. Naruto said. There are lots of people here who would help you. I'm sure the old woman at the curry shop outside of town would treat you like family. And you could always come to Konoha. Unlike Kiri, they love bloodline holders there and I'm sure Grandma Tsunade could help you with your illness. Renmara said nothing. Well, at least give it a shot. Okay, Raiga wanted me too, so I guess I'll try. Naruto had a clone pick the boy up and the group returned to town. The clones they left behind had long since finished with the remaining gang members and tied up the other members of the Kurosuke family. Kurashi hadn't tried anything either. After being thanked by the people of the town, the Jinchuriki, along with Renmara and Kurashi, returned to the Curry of Life shop, where Kurashi was given Sancho's 300% spicy punishment curry. Renmara decided to stay at the shop, where he was welcomed by Grandma Sancho and the now truly reformed Kurashi and Jiraiya. Naruto and Fu quickly made an excuse to leave when Sancho offered them extra spicy curry as a reward. So, how'd we do, Ero-sensei? Fu asked, curious of how he evaluated the way they handled their mission. Well, you did a pretty good job. You planned ahead and got a good idea of the enemy forces before making your move. You took out the first group as quietly as you could and avoided detection as you moved through the village but were forced to move early due to Rokusuke. You saved him and had backup and escape plans ready and took no chances with your own safety or that of the villagers. You made sure Renmara wasn't a threat before trusting him and you managed to take down a member of the Seven Swordsmen. I'd say, you handled it like a chunin. Speaking of Raiga, what do you plan to do with his swords? His bounties double if they're included and you already have a sword. I think I'll keep his them, might find a use for them later. Naruto said. Fu should take the bounty. I don't really need it. I have more than enough to live off of from my casino winnings. It was true, he did still have about 60 million left. And with his luck at gambling, he would have no trouble making more. He was only banned from casinos in that one town in the land of rivers. No, Naruto. It was a joint effort, so let's split it. You could have taken him alone. Naruto pointed out. It was true. Alone, Fu may have been forced to go 3 tails, but that would have been more than enough. Fu, just keep it. Like he said, he can easily make money with his luck. Now come on, after we collect Raiga's bounty, we're heading back to that clearing we found those 3 miners in. Though it took some more convincing, Fu was eventually talked into keeping the bounty. Jiraiya also decided to send them after a few more bounties for practice and real combat experience before they returned to Konoha. After they reached the clearing, they worked on learning new jutsu and perfecting everything they knew. 4 more months and they had become fairly skilled with seals, high chunin to low jonin level with genjutsu, and Naruto's space-time jutsu abilities had improved. Their other skills showed normal improvement. They always had Jiraiya's weight seals on, further improving their physical abilities, and Naruto learned to use the Kiba blades and their lightning powers. They also went on 3 bounty hunting missions for experience. The first being a low jonin with a bounty of 10 million ryo, the second had been worth 7 million, and the third being a group of 8 chunin level missing nin and bandits led by a low jonin. Together these ninja were worth 14 million. That particular job showed good planning skills, as the group had taken many civilians hostage to use as slaves and they managed to save them all. Naruto couldn't convince Fu to keep all of it, and the 31 million was split between them. There was still a little over half a year left before it was time to return to Konoha, and Jiraiya decided that it was again time to take a week-long break, this time in a resort town with hot springs on the outskirts of the Land of Fire. The two had grown a bit. Naruto now stood at 5 feet 3 and Fu at 5 feet 2. Fu's clothing style was mostly unchanged aside from the fact that her bandages had been replaced with fishnet armor that didn't cover her midriff. Naruto's tracksuit had been replaced with one that had black where the old one had blue and around the zipper. Naruto walked through the town alone. Jiraiya was off at a peaking on a hot spring and Fu was relaxing in another hot spring, which Jiraiya made sure was far away from the one he was at because 1. She threatened to use a water sword enhanced 1,000 years of death if she caught him peeping on her, and 2. The last time she caught him peeping on a hot spring she wasn't in, she got Naruto and shrieked as loud as she could. Eek! Pervert! There's a peeping Tom peeking on the hot springs, which resulted in Jiraiya being beaten senseless by a horde of angry women while Naruto and Fu laughed their asses off at the spectacle. Naruto had been thinking about Fu. He had never connected with someone as well as he had with her, and he couldn't deny he thought she was attractive. They had grown very close over the past 2 years since they left Taki, talking about their experiences, likes, dislikes, and sharing various troubles and laughs, and he really liked spending time with her. As he was consumed with his thoughts of his mint-haired companion, he walked by a stand and something caught his eye. The stand had all sorts of decorations, ornaments and masks, but what had come to his attention was an orange hair clip. Naruto couldn't help but think how it would match the green-haired Jinchuriki's eyes. The stand owner, a middle-aged man, noticed the teen looking at his wares and, after waiting for a few moments to see if something would hold his interest, spoke up. "Hey, kid, see anything you like?" the proprietor asked. Naruto's head snapped from the ornament to the man. "Huh, oh, yeah, I guess, that hair clip." "Huh." The man looked at the orange hair clip. "Ah, got yourself a girlfriend?" "What? No, I mean, she," Naruto sputtered. There's this girl I know and I think she'd like it, that's all." The stand owner smirked knowingly and chuckled. "Hey, whatever you say, kid. It's 80 Ryo. The blonde paid for it and left." Naruto walked around town for the rest of the day. He had some snacks, played some games, and bought some souvenirs. It was a few minutes before sunset and the sun was just over the horizon, painting the sky orange and the clouds a rusty red. He jumped to the top of a building searching for his friend to find her sitting on a nearby roof, watching the beautiful scenery. "Hey, Fu, what are you doing up here?" Naruto asked as he landed nearby. Fu turned to look at the boy. "Oh, hey Naruto, just watching the sunset," she responded, looking back towards the sun. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" "Huh," Naruto answered dumbly before looking to the sky. "Yeah, it is. I'm surprised I never noticed it before. In Taki, I would almost always climb to the top of the sacred tree and watch the sunset. It helped that I didn't have to worry about the glares up there." Fu said and Naruto nodded. "Oh yeah, I got you this." Naruto reached into his pocket and pulled out the hairclip he'd bought. The girl looked surprised at the gift. "You got this for me?" Fu asked as she took it and looked at it in her hand. "Why, I thought it would look good on you, it matches your eyes." "My eyes?" The green-haired girl raised a brow. "Yeah, when we first met, I was drawn to them." "You have beautiful eyes, Fu." Naruto elaborated with a smile, causing Fu to blush before giving him a slightly annoyed look. "You're just saying that because they're your favorite color," Fu stated and Naruto shook his head. "It's not just that. From the moment I saw them, I thought there was something striking about them. Not just the color, it's just, I don't know. I always thought they were stunning." Fu's blush deepened from the blonde's words. "I also noticed that they had the same look mine used to have. I knew you had been through the same thing I had, that hell called loneliness. That's why I couldn't leave you like that." Naruto smiled. "And yeah, they are my favorite color," he said in a playful manner, causing Fu to giggle. Thank you, for that and the hair clip. This is the first thing anyone's ever given me. Fu said with a heartfelt smile before she attempted to put it on. Here, let me. Naruto reached with his hand. The green-haired girl handed him the hairclip and Naruto placed it above her right eye. There. The blonde smiled. It suits you perfectly, you look really pretty. Fu's blush deepened as Naruto's gaze turned back to the sky. Since they left Taki, the two had grown closer and Fu had begun to recognize that her feelings for the boy may be deeper than friendship. After a moment of thought, she made a decision. Naruto. Huh. Naruto turned to face the green-haired girl, only for her soft lips to land on his in a delicate kiss. It was a small, chaste kiss, but it still managed to bring a deep blush to both of their faces. It was over almost as quickly as it began, with both of them jerking back as if scalded. Fu turned her face away in embarrassment. Naruto opened his mouth to speak, however, his mind was so disjointed that he couldn't even form a proper sentence. Fu. What? Fu turned back to him, uneasiness coursing through her as she struggled to tell him how she felt. Her heart wouldn't stop beating as she tried to voice her feelings. Naruto, I like you, the green-haired girl closed her eyes, taking a deep breath before opening her eyes and staring into the blonde cerulean pools. I want to be with you. Naruto's eyes widened in astonishment at Fu's admission. This girl, whose presence he'd come to enjoy even more than Sakura's, felt that way about him. Finding it hard to voice his thoughts due to his shock and the emotions coursing through him, he asked, "Why would you want to be with me?" Now that she had said it, she knew there was no backing out. The fear of rejection, the fear that she may have ruined her relationship with her fellow Jinchuriki dominated her being as she answered his question. I've admired you ever since you saved my former village. And my admiration only grew when I found out you were like me. That you stayed cheerful and happy, and had such a strong will, despite living the same life I had. Your resolve, your drive to never give up, and the fact that you showed your village they were wrong about you inspired me when I was starting to lose hope and I realized I wanted to be more like you. The time since I left Taki has been the happiest of my life, because you were there with me. During all the time we spent together, your drive, your goals became mine, and I realized that I wanted to spend more time with you. That I wanted to keep sharing and facing the good and the bad, together. In the haze that dominated Naruto's mind, a question arose. Why would you tell me when you knew how I felt about Sakura? The fear and certainty that she was going to be rejected brought tears to her eyes. Not wanting to show them, Fu stood and turned her back to Naruto. Because it would be better to take the plunge and be rejected than to keep this bottled up. Fu closed her eyes, willing the tears away as she swallowed the lump in her throat. This was it. He probably still had feelings for his teammate. At least she had tried. She hoped at least things wouldn't be too awkward. Her eyes shot open when she felt a pair of arms wrap around her and she found herself in the blonde's embrace. The truth is, the blonde began, his head at her shoulder. I really liked Sakura in the past. But then I met someone else. He eased his hold over her and turned Fu around, facing her shocked look. This smart, beautiful girl I was drawn to from the moment I met her. This wonderful girl, who over the years I came to care for more than I ever did for Sakura. He cupped her cheek, giving her a warm, gentle smile. I met you. I want to be together with you and I really like you too, Fu. Fu was stunned. She'd never thought a day like this would come. She stood perfectly still for a moment before her arms swiftly wrapped around his neck, tears, now of joy, rolling down her face. The pair melted into their embrace as they were consumed with a passion they'd never experienced before while, unknown to them, Jiraiya watched from a nearby building with a smile. An hour later, the pair of Jinchuriki walked down the hall to their room. Naruto opened the door and found Jiraiya standing in the center of the room, smirking at his students. Hey, I was wondering when you two would show up, so, anything of interest happened today? The old man said, playing dumb. You know very well what happened, Aro-sensei. Fu said. Hey, well, I'm happy for you too. I'm sure you'll make each other happy. Take it from someone who spent most of his life getting turned down by the first girl he fell for. Jiraiya said, much to the pair's shock. Tsunade. Naruto asked. I've told you before, haven't I? How much your team reminds me of my own. You, Sakura and Sasuke, and the bonds you shared, are almost exactly like the ones between me, Tsunade and Orochimaru, though Tsunade didn't have feelings for Orochimaru like Sakura does for Sasuke. I spent years focused on Tsunade, and she turned me down every time. The hermit finished on a sad note. Anyway, it's late, we should go to bed, we'll stay here for a few more days and then get back to training. What are we doing next? We'll improve on what you have and the speed of your jutsu, then I want you to work on your own techniques and your ability to sense others. But don't think about it now. Just relax and enjoy your time here. They both agreed and soon turned in wishing each other good night before laying down. As the pair drifted off to a pleasant sleep, Jiraiya was wide awake on the roof of the building, quickly writing down what he was sure was going to be one of the highlights of his new bestseller. And so, Shu threw her arms around Nakuro's neck as the two held one another, tears of joy streaming down her face. As she melted into his embrace, Nakuro knew he had found his one true love. No. It needs something to spice it up. Jiraiya paused for a second, raising his pen to his chin in thought before a perverted smirk spread across his face and an equally perverse giggle escaped him and he scribbled down more notes. Shu threw her arms around Nakuro's neck and claimed his lips, the wandering warrior reciprocating and massaging her lips with his own. As the kiss became more and more impassioned and they began dueling with their tongues, Nakuro's hands wandered to Shu's chest, where he proceeded to grope her through her clothes. Shu moaned at the man's ministrations as desire began to cloud her eyes. Yes. This is gold. I knew that brat would give me just as much material as his old man. The next day, Naruto and Fu were walking through the town together. They had decided that to go on their first date and spend the day together. Actually, they'd be sure to spend a lot of their time together over the next few days, as they'd soon be going back to training. They had precious little time before they would be returning to spending most of their day's training. As soon as they stepped outside of their hotel, they immediately decided to head to a clothing store, noting that their normal clothing wasn't really suitable for a date. They walked through the doors of the store and their gaze washed over the interior. It was a fairly large shop that catered mostly for civilians. All manner of clothing in various different sizes hung on racks and shelves. The pair separated, planning to find each other once they had some things to try on. Fu walked through the women's section, looking at the various kimonos that surrounded her. As she stopped and inspected one that caught her interest, she noticed someone approaching. She looked up to find a clerk, a young woman only a few years older than her with long, brown hair making her way towards her. Hello, miss. Can I help you in any way? The clerk greeted. Fu nodded, giving a slight smile. Yes, thank you. I'm not entirely sure what I'm looking for. The older teen looked at her with a critical eye, thinking of what she could suggest for her to try. Well, do you have some idea what you're looking for? Fu walked around the rack and examined a long blue dress. Well, something beautiful and graceful, preferably white. The green-haired girl had a fondness for the color akin to her fellow Jinchuriki's liking of the color orange, which is why she wore the pure color despite the fact that it was impractical for a kunoichi. Her stubbornness on the subject being another thing she had in common with her new boyfriend. Your favorite color? The woman observed as she looked over the customer, her words more of a statement than a question. Are you trying to impress someone? Fu nodded, her smile growing as she remembered what she was doing there. Yeah, I'm on a date, so I need something that really gets his attention. The brunette got an excited gleam in her eyes as she quickly approached the younger teen. You're on a date, right now? The green-haired girl gave an affirmative. He's someone I've known for a long time and we recently realized that what we feel for each other is more than friendship. From the moment we met, He has always been there for me and I want to surprise him with something really stunning. She spoke with a warm expression. Wow. The clerk gained a curious look. But, shouldn't you have a better idea of what you want then? Fu seemed slightly embarrassed. Well, it's my first date, so. You're first. The young woman exclaimed excitedly, causing Fu to step back slightly as the gleam returned to the older girl's eyes, having grown in intensity. The clerk shot forward, a roll of measuring tape having appeared in her hands seemingly out of nowhere, making Fu briefly question if the woman was really a civilian. Oh, that's so wonderful. The first date, that's one of the most magical experiences in a girl's life, and with someone like you've described, don't worry, I'll make sure you look absolutely gorgeous. He'll die from a nosebleed the moment he sets his eyes on you. The blonde stood at a clothing rack, smiling when he found a orange kimono top in his size. He lifted it up and looked over it for a moment before a familiar voice caught his attention. Naruto. The voice called out from behind him. He turned his head and his jaw dropped, the shirt he was holding slipping from his grasp when he caught sight of his new girlfriend. She was wearing a flowing white kimono with green flower designs along the hem that hugged her figure perfectly. How do I look? Fu asked, striking a slight pose as she raised her right hand to her hair. Naruto felt his face heat up. Why you, he stammered as the green-haired girl looked at him expectantly. Incredible, you're beautiful, Fu. The girl felt her own cheeks flush at his compliment. Including the one from yesterday, this was the second time in her entire life she had received a flattering remark of any kind about her appearance. So, did you find something? Fu asked, averting her gaze and scratching her cheek. Naruto nodded, recovering from the stuttering mess the sight of his fellow Jinchuriki had reduced him to. Just gotta try it on. Minutes later, they rang up their purchases and exited the store, Fu wearing the white kimono and Naruto wearing the orange kimono top with black pants. So, what should we do? Fu spoke, having no experience with this situation. It was too early to get something to eat. I don't know. Oh, how about we go see the latest Princess Gale movie? Naruto said with a snap of his fingers. That sounds good. I can hardly remember the last time I've been to the theater. The green-haired girl replied. Before she could do anything else, Naruto held his hand out to her, a gesture that seemed to surprise her a bit. She looked to the blonde's face and saw he was giving her a gentle smile. She returned his expression and let her hand join his. The pair then left in search of the nearest theater, their fingers laced together. Not knowing their way around the village, they had to stop and ask for directions, but soon managed to locate it. They stepped up to the booth and paid for their tickets and entered the building. The pair rushed down the halls, having gotten last-minute tickets, and entered the auditorium just as the lights began to go out. Phew, just made it. Naruto commented as they sat down in the red-cushioned seats near the edge of one of the center rows. The movie began with the princess and her most loyal follower standing on a cliff, looking down on what had been a battlefield. The bodies of the fallen lie strewn across the earth as the narrator explained the backstory, how, after the end of the last film, there had been a short period of peace before a new villain, a dark woman named Yu, the princess of a fallen kingdom, who possessed a malevolent, black-colored chakra appeared. Her chakra allowed her to summon and control an army of demons with which she waged war, intent on conquering the world to restore her fallen nation. Yu's unnatural chakra seemed to sap the life of all those around her, and so, the only hope was Princess Gale's fabled rainbow chakra, the only thing that seemed to counter the evil power. The title appeared as Princess Gale and her followed battled the horde of monsters. As they watched the film, the two Jinchuriki leaned against the armrest, their hands touching in the process. They both jolted back, surprised by the interaction before muttering an apology to each other. However, both found they'd enjoyed the brief event. As the movie continued, Naruto glanced at Fu and saw her hand was back on the armrest and rested his own hand on top of hers, causing her to turn to him. He smiled at her, and she returned the look. During a scene where it was hinted that the princess and her most loyal warrior may have feelings for one another, Fu decided to go a little further. Naruto turned his head when she took her hand away from his and his eyes widened when she leaned across the armrest against his shoulder. As he gazed at her face, she gave him a timid look that clearly said, "If I'm making you uncomfortable, I can move away." To her pleasure, Naruto immediately wrapped an arm around her shoulders, pulling her closer. Content. She rested her head on him, both enjoying the physical contact as the movie continued. In the end, it was revealed that Princess Yu was being controlled by a demon, the true source of the black chakra. In a final violent clash of black and rainbow energy, the courage and belief of her fellows allowed Princess Gale to overcome the demonic power and exorcise the demon. Princess Yu, revealed to have died at the fall of her home, was allowed to join her family, her body turning to dust after apologizing to the heroes and thanking them for setting her free. After the credits rolled, the two wandered the village in search of something else to do, stopping at various stands but never doing anything more than looking. Eventually, they came upon a gambling parlor. The structure was fairly large, and its main features were an area for Chohan, currently occupied by a dozen players, and a few poker tables, along with a bar for the players to relax at. Naruto turned to his girlfriend, a smirk spreading across his face as he rubbed his hands together. "Hey, Fu, what do you say we have some fun cleaning this place out?" Fu gave him a grin. "Naruto, you read my mind." The duo stepped inside and immediately some of the gamblers sized them up, some even chuckling. It was obvious they all thought they had happened across some easy pickings. Oh, how wrong they were. "Well, look at that. What brings a couple of kids like you in?" One of the gamblers playing Chohan asked. "Oh, just looking for a good time. Think you can let us into your game?" Naruto asked, playing the part of a naive kid, causing his girlfriend to smirk internally. "No problem, kid. Take a seat." The man gestured to the tatami mat across from him and the blonde sat himself down. Fu looked over to one of the other games. "I'm going to try my luck at the poker table. Have fun. Good luck," Naruto called after her. The gambler then threw 2 pieces of dice into a bamboo cup, threw it into the air, caught it and slammed it down. "All right, place your bets." Naruto placed 2,000 ryo down. "I'll take Han." All the other players did the same, adding their money to the pot. The man lifted the cup to revealing 3 and 4. "Han it is," the man said, watching as the gamblers collected their winnings before glancing at the blonde. "Looks like you got lucky there, kid. Wonder how long that luck's gonna last." Naruto only smirked in response. Meanwhile, Fu sat at a poker table. She may not have been blessed with the luck of a fox like her blonde boyfriend, but as a ninja, she was trained in reading people and thus, was easily able to call when the people around her were bluffing. The fact that the people of Taki didn't try to hinder her training, not even in that regard, was one of the few things she had been grateful for back in the village. She smirked as she accurately deduced her rival was bluffing and watched him fold before collecting the pot. "Lucky break. Hope you're going to give us a chance to win that back," one of the gamblers stated. Fu smirked. "Oh, don't worry. We plan to stick around for a while." The teens spent the next hour gambling. Fu came out with 10,000 more ryo than she started with while Naruto won almost every game, walking away with 25,000 ryo, much to the other gamblers' dismay. All the other players almost cheered when the Jinchuriki decided to leave and find a place to eat. The young couple resumed their trek through the village and soon came upon a fairly nice place. They stepped into the building and swept their eyes across the establishment. The restaurant had hardwood floors and mahogany chairs and tables. The walls were lined with booths with padded leather cushions and lanterns hanging over them. There was also a bar, over which a tapestry displaying a battle and a decorative symbol was carved into the walls on either side of it. The pair walked to the hostess's desk, who noticed their approach and smiled. "Welcome. Table for 2, I presume?" the hostess said. The Jinchuriki nodded and were led to a table where a waitress soon took their orders. They talked for a bit until their meals were brought to them, teriyaki with takoyaki on the side. So, Naruto, got any other stories you haven't told me? Fu asked as they ate. Well, there was that time me and the pervy sage were looking for Tsunade. That's when we first ran into the Akatsuki. You've already met some of them. Fu asked, surprised, and Naruto nodded. What happened? Well, it was just after the Suna and Oto attacked. We needed a new Hokage and it was either the perv or Tsunade. Well, he did say later that there was one other candidate. Really? Who? Someone named Danzo, but he said that Danzo becoming Hokage would probably be worse than the invasion, didn't say why. Anyway, he brought me for two reasons, to teach me the Rasengan and to protect me from the Akatsuki. But they got him by hypnotizing some pretty girl and I wound up facing them alone. Why am I not surprised that worked? Fu sighed. Who were they? Itachi Uchiha and Kisame Hoshigaki. Fu's eyes widened when he told her this. I didn't know who they were, but the moment I saw them I knew I was screwed. Then Sasuke showed up, but when he saw his brother he became obsessed with beating him and charged him with Chidori. Fu was clearly shocked to hear that. Wait, you're telling me Sasuke, who was Chunin level at best, attacked Itachi Uchiha head on? Yeah, I guess when he saw the guy who massacred his clan he just snapped. And what happened to him? Itachi deflected his Chidori like it was nothing, kicked him into a wall and cast this special genjutsu on him that put him in a coma. And that's why you shouldn't let your anger control your actions, that's what being a hothead gets you. He's not. Naruto began. He could think of a lot of negative things one could call Sasuke, but he wasn't usually hot-headed. I mean you, I don't want something like that to happen to you, Naruto. Fu said, and Naruto looked surprised. People like us, because of how we were shunned, those who accept us mean more to us than most others, which means we react that much more when their hurt are taken from us. I don't want you to put yourself in danger because of something like that. I don't want to risk losing you like that. Fu said seriously. Naruto, after what he did to Sasuke, what would you do if Orochimaru showed up out of nowhere and mocked you about it? Naruto took on a pensive expression. He knew what he'd do. He would fight him with everything he had, draw on as much of the Kyuubi's power as possible, and it would probably not be enough. Sorry Naruto, I'm ruining our date, go back to the story. No, you're right, Naruto said before looking up at her. But you're also right that we shouldn't think of that right now. Anyway, we kinda got lucky. That walking can of shark fin soup had his sword eat the Kyuubi's chakra when I tried to use it, but Sasuke distracted them until pervy sage showed up. He scared them off and a Jonin guy took Sasuke back to the village. We spent a day in a town for a festival and the perv spent all my money after he had the nerve to tell me to be careful with it. Naruto growled at the end and Fu giggled. Then, Naruto explained how Jiraiya had taught him the Rasengan and his bet with Tsunade and how she had disrespected the Hokage, ending with the battle between the Sannin, the part he was conscious for anyway, as they continued to eat their food. Wow. So you're basically the reason why Tsunade became the 5th Hokage. Fu said in awe as Naruto gave her a toothy grin. Yep. Pretty amazing, huh? Yeah. You know, you have amazing charisma. Huh, I don't know about that, Naruto said sheepishly. It's true, though, you changed Tsunade's worldview, after she'd been that way so long. You did the same to Shibuki, Seimei, Gaara, me too. If it wasn't for you, I don't know where I'd be right now, I was just about ready to give up hope. Don't talk like that, but it's true, but, we shouldn't be talking about things like that on a date. Fu said. The two soon finished their meal and left after Naruto paid the bill. As the two walked down the streets, Fu turned to the blonde. This has been great, Naruto. So far, today has been the second best day of my life. Naruto seemed slightly surprised. Really? When was the first? Fu giggled. Yesterday. The blonde smiled. Thanks, Fu, I've had fun too. So, what do you want to do next? Fu hummed as she looked to the sky before turning to her boyfriend. Have you been to the hot springs around here? No. Want to go to one? Yeah. Let's go for it. The two explored the village until they found a hot spring that allowed mixed bathing. They entered through the large double doors and were thankful that no one but the attendant was there. Walking up to the attendant's station, they paid the allotted amount to enter the hot springs and they were given a pair of towels. The new couple walked down the hall together before separating at the changing rooms. Naruto quickly got undressed, placing his clothes in one of the cubbyholes while wrapping a towel around his waist. Once he finished and entered the hot spring, finding Fu had yet to enter. He walked forward until he stood at the water's edge before he heard the sound of the door sliding open. He turned and saw Fu standing at the entrance. The green-haired girl stepped inside and immediately caught sight of her new boyfriend standing on the edge of the spring. She could almost feel the blood rushing to her cheeks as her eyes fell over his muscles, normally hidden by his clothing, which while not large, were extremely well defined, lacking any excess bulk that would weigh him down. Fu had to gulp, feeling blood rush to her cheeks as she watched some of the sweat that was beginning to accumulate on the blonde as it trailed over his chiseled pectorals, moving lower and leaving a slight trail down his washboard abs before disappearing within his towel. The blonde couldn't help but admire his new girlfriend's beauty. Though her towel hid most of her body, it was tightly wrapped and did little to hide the feminine figure of her toned and lithe form, the fabric hugging firmly to her curves, showing off the shape of her slender waist and well-proportioned hips, not that her normal clothing didn't show those aspects of her off, and barely restricting her C-cup S. The towel wasn't high enough to completely cover her chest, allowing one to see the top of her cleavage. Her normal clothing did nothing to hide them and he'd seen them before, but his gaze also covered her strong and toned but unmistakably feminine legs befitting a kunoichi, and her skin was smooth and flawless, a benefit of being a Jinchuriki, giving her enhanced healing that, while not nearly as impressive as Naruto's regeneration, ensured that no imperfections or scars would mar her appearance. The blue-eyed Jinchuriki was briefly mesmerized by her form, feeling his own cheeks heat up slightly as he took in the exotic quality given to her by her caramel-colored skin and the orange eyes he'd been drawn to from the moment he met her, and he thought of seeing her without the towel. You haven't gotten in yet? Fu asked, her eyes darting away out of nervousness and embarrassment. I was just about to. Naruto replied as Fu joined him at the water's edge. The pair of Jinchuriki looked at each other, butterflies in their stomach as they stood for a brief moment before taking their towels off and easing themselves into the water, taking care not to look in the other's direction as they did so, fearful that the other may think they had more in common with their sensei than they let on. Naruto noticed the water go still, indicating his fellow Jinchuriki had stopped moving, and glanced at the girl, taking care to keep his gaze above the waterline, focusing on her face. Their looks met and the blonde's eyes darted away again. Naruto had to admit, he wanted to look. He was a teenager with hormones after all, and, while not being a pervert himself, he was the creator of several perverted jutsu, but that want was far outweighed by his concern for his new girlfriend's feelings. He tried distracting himself by looking around the spring. Anywhere but the spot occupied by the object of his desires. Unfortunately, he found out the more he tried to ignore it, the more his mind and imagination run wild. Naruto felt restless as sweat started pouring on his forehead and his eyes began to itch. Maybe a quick peek, just so he could burn the image of her body in his memory, so his eyes wouldn't dart off anymore. While Naruto was facing inner turmoil, his girlfriend was curiously observing him. Even though she was embarrassed by the situation, she couldn't help but feel amusement at the violent clash between the blonde's iron will and the temptation standing so close near him, judging from the fidgeting and rapid change of expressions she caught glimpse of. The fact he was trying to take her feelings into consideration was quite endearing, and Fu couldn't help but feel happy that she had such a boyfriend. Of course, she had looked over his body. Considering the situation they were in and the fact they had just started dating, it would be foolish if she didn't look. She had seen his chest and torso before, but this time it was different. Not to mention she could see his well-toned legs, and despite herself, her eyes would always seem to wander over his crotch. She was a teenager after all. Fu smirked nervously, trying to lessen the discomfort of the situation. What's wrong? Afraid you'll find out you have more in common with Sensei than you'd like to believe. Why yeah, right. How many times have I said I'm not a pervert? This coming from the guy who invented a jutsu that turns him into a female with abnormally large tits. Naruto sputtered and Fu chuckled a bit, the atmosphere now slightly more comfortable. After a pause, she spoke up again. Naruto, there's nothing wrong with looking in this situation. In fact, it'd be strange if you didn't. Or maybe you don't find me attractive? She questioned, the second statement having a slightly dejected tone. She didn't know what it was, but for some reason she really felt like teasing him. Maybe it was because he looked so cute when he was embarrassed. Naruto's eyes widened and he rapidly turned his head towards her. Of course not, Fu. You're really beautiful. I just don't, he trailed off, with his gaze wandering over her body, any coherent thought completely discarded. Fu felt her face heating up under his intense look and had to suppress the urge to cover herself. That would make things awkward, and besides, she trusted Naruto. She realized she was more worried whether he would like her body, since like any girl she had her own insecurities. Not getting any compliments in her life until yesterday only increased them. She felt so exposed, so vulnerable, so, like she was bearing everything she had for him to see. Fu knew Naruto wasn't the type of person to do something like that, but she felt a bit scared at the prospect of him crushing her heart with his disapproval. With her blush ever so present, she looked away slightly, swallowing the lump in her throat and sporting a nervous smile, like what you see. Her innocent question produced an immediate effect, snapping Naruto's gaze away from her body and onto her face. His cheeks immediately reddened as he realized he had been checking out Fu's gorgeous form for who knows how long. What if she felt insulted? What if she thought he just wanted her body? What if she broke up with him? Smooth, Naruto, very smooth. Keep this up and you'll probably set the new world record for fastest guy ever dumped. Dispelling the frightening thoughts, the blonde began spluttering apologies and asking for forgiveness at a speed that could very well rival the one of his late father. It was amazing how fast the tongue could work under pressure. His slightly insane ramblings were cut short when he heard a giggle and a hand cupped his cheek. He focused on a gently smiling Fu, who had decided to finally give her boyfriend some peace. I don't mind if you look, Naruto. I told you, in this situation it'd be weird if you didn't. I wouldn't have agreed to enter, if I didn't trust you. She smiled shyly as Naruto nodded, relieved that he wasn't in trouble. His comfort was brief, when he saw the cute smile changing into an evil smirk. Besides, I checked you out as well, so it's only fair. The green-haired girl giggled as she pointedly looked down. Naruto's eyes widened at the sudden realization, and the boy had the feeling his cheeks were so warm from blushing, that he could actually cook something on them. Wah. Hey. Maybe you are the one the pervy sage rubbed off on. He pointed an accusing finger, which was only meant by Fu's giggle. Soon enough, the blonde was drawn in and laughed. The pair began to really relax after this and sunk into the water, enjoying the temperature and the other's company. After a few minutes, Naruto moved closer to the green-haired girl, who did the same until their shoulders were touching. They took peeks at each other from time to time, now feeling more comfortable with each other's presence. Unfortunately, Naruto realized he was getting a reaction, and even though she had said she was fine with him looking, something like that was going a bit over the top. He immediately stopped taking glances and tried to calm down, by forcing himself to think of the most unarousing things possible. Fu had noticed her boyfriend had stopped looking at her and now had a frown painted on his face. She wondered what the cause behind it was, and her insecurities were immediately brought back to the surface. She bit her lip before letting out a sigh. Maybe it wasn't a good idea to be direct, but this would never stop bothering her. You never answered my question, you know. The girl spoke, looking away in embarrassment. Naruto turned a questioning look at her and immediately replayed what was said in his mind. Confusion overcame him as he realized what she was talking about. How could she even ask? But then the blonde noticed her tensed body, the expectant look. Realizing what that meant, he smirked. It was payback time. Which question? He asked, faking his usual obliviousness. Oh, you mean if I liked what I saw? Too embarrassed to say anything, his girlfriend nodded ever so slightly. Wheel. Naruto drew out, pointedly looked over every spot of her whole body. Fu's heart tightened as the prospect of him not liking her body seemed all too real now. The blonde though decided it was enough and cupped her cheek, making her meet his gaze. I've seen many beautiful women, but I've never met anyone as stunning as you. He smiled gently. Fu felt her face burn. This was the nicest thing anyone has ever said to her. She realized he had drawn it out on purpose, but the girl felt so happy, she decided to let it slide this time. In fact, she was about to jump and kiss him, when she noticed something. Averting her gaze down, Fu saw Naruto was saluting. Caught up in his teasing, looking over her body so much had actually backfired. The mint-haired girl smirked. Well, I think it's decided. It looks like you are the one that has taken the teachings of sensei to heart. Fu couldn't keep herself from giggling as she pointed down. Realizing what she meant, Naruto was about to go into another fit of spluttering. This time he never had the chance as instead he yelped and jumped slightly from being poked in the ribs. Oh, just relax and enjoy the hot springs. Fu reprimanded him and leaned her head onto his shoulder, closing her eyes slightly. The blonde just gulped and rested his head over hers, letting out a sigh. With the tension quickly leaving him, he moved his arm over her leg. He felt her tense at the sudden motion, but before she could do anything, the boy grabbed her hand and intertwined their fingers. Fu relaxed and smiled as she realized what he had actually wanted to do. As they sat together, the mint-haired girl thought of what the future could hold for them, which led to her remembering that in about half a year, they'd be making their way to Naruto's home village. That thought, of being surrounded by people who knew what she was, caused a small amount of worry to enter her heart. Naruto, the tanned girl said, getting the blonde's attention. The blue-eyed Jinchuriki turned to her to see her staring into the water, uncertainty clear on her features. Do you think they'll accept me in Konoha? I don't want to go back to being hated after all this time. Naruto gave her a reassuring smile. I'm sure they will. Fu turned her head and met his gaze, clearly not reassured in the least. Naruto, you had to save the entire village before they came to accept you, and no one in your generation knew you were a Jinchuriki. Her eyes fell back to the water. They've probably been told about me, but they don't know me like you do. What if they think? Fu. Naruto cut her off, cupping her chin and raising her face so he could look into her orange orbs. He understood why she felt this way. She had gotten used to being around people since she left Taki, even coming to enjoy it. This would be the first time since she lived in her home village she'd be surrounded by people who knew what she was. The thought of being glared at, of seeing those eyes that made him feel like he wasn't even human again, would terrify the blonde had he not already realized what really mattered. Don't worry about what they think. I spent years trying to get the people of my village to see me for who I was, but you know what? I realized it didn't matter. Fu looked surprised as Naruto elaborated. Whether they hate me or not, as long as I have my precious people, it doesn't matter what they or anyone else throw at me. And, out of everyone I care for, you're the most precious to me. Fu's eyes widened as a warm smile spread across his face as he moved his hand to her cheek. As long as you're with me, nothing anyone says or does really matters. Don't forget the promise I made to you. I never go back on my word. You'll never be alone again, because I'll always be here for you. Fu returned his smile, placing her hand over his as they gave each other a loving look, the girl's orange pools telling him her fears had withered away from his words. He took his hand away and she leaned against him, resting her head on his shoulder again. After a few minutes of silently relaxing together, Fu looked to the sky, which was beginning to change to orange as the sun approached the horizon. Look at the sky. Let's go. I want to watch the sunset again. Naruto agreed, and minutes later the pair had changed back into their kimono, left the spring, and were quickly making their way to the top of the highest building in town to get the best vantage point, but not before getting ice cream. They silently watched, enjoying each other's company on top of a building, sharing their frozen treat as they watched the sunset paint the horizon orange again. Afterwards, they walked home in the light of a crescent moon. They stopped as they got to the door of their hotel. Tonight was great, Naruto, I had a lot of fun. Was this your first date too? Fu said with a smile. Not exactly. I went on a date with Sakura once, if you could call it that. She just went so we could talk about Sasuke. Naruto replied sadly, before perking up, but you know, I think I'll consider this one as my first date as well as my kiss with you as my first one. After all, you're the first girl I've felt so strongly for. With Sakura it was just a crush, but with you. Naruto couldn't finish since his ability to speak was taken away by Fu's lips. His surprise was brief though, as he closed his eyes and reciprocated the gesture, applying pressure with his mouth while enjoying the taste and feel of her warm, soft lips. The young couple threw their arms around each other as both felt a pleasurable jolt coupled with immense passion that neither had ever experienced before. When they separated, they looked at each other, their faces deep red. Wow, Fu said, stupefied. Yeah, Naruto was about to say something but was interrupted. Hey, you two, Jiraiya said, appearing behind them with a smirk, shocking the duo. Sorry to interrupt, but Tsunade would kill me if you bring Fu to Konoha carrying a kid. The Jinchuriki's faces turned completely red with embarrassment. Pervy sage. Arrow sensei. Relax, I'm just kidding. So, how'd it go? A smirk worthy of his self-proclaimed super pervert status spread across his face, immediately setting off alarms in both his students' minds before his next question confirmed their fears. How was the hot spring? Fu paled slightly. You were spying on us. Come on, you didn't think I'd let my students go on their first date without making sure they had fun, now did you? So, Fu, was it harder than a kunai? And Naruto, I'm sure you finally see why I find the female form so irresistible, am I right? The two Jinchuriki's faces turned matching shades of scarlet as the Toad Sanin chuckled. I knew I'd rub off on the both of you. It's only a matter of time before you'll both be unable to keep your hands off each other. He laughed loudly as the blonde finally found his voice and began to protest while the green-haired girl tilted her head down, her hair covering her eyes. Unfortunately for the sage, in the face of his student's new relationship, he had forgotten about Fu's earlier threat of what would happen to him if he were to peek on her. He immediately remembered and paled when the female Jinchuriki's head shot up, outrage blazing in her orange orbs as she formed a water sword in her hand. The pervert spent the next 3 hours avoiding Fu's water sword while Naruto enjoyed the show before she gave up, promising she'd remember what he'd done. He made a silent note not to mention anything that might reveal his spying to the young couple next time, since it might very well jeopardize his latest masterpiece. Soon enough, the excitement died down and the group prepared for sleep. As Naruto tied the sash on his sleepwear, he thought about some of what they talked about and knew Fu had made a good point. He had been told by Jiraiya his hot-headedness could get him killed, and thinking about what happened to Sasuke he knew he had to learn to control his emotions. There were only about 6 months left till they returned to Konoha, so he still had time. The two enjoyed the rest of their time in the town, growing closer for the next few days before they were on the move again. 3 days later, the trio arrived at a rocky clearing with a river in the shadow of a mountain about halfway to the southwest border of the Land of Fire from Konoha, far enough away to be out of their range. Alright kids, since we're coming down to the wire here, I want you to up your clones to 200. After you take your control of your Biju to the next level, we're going to focus on mastering what you know and increasing your speed and that of your jutsu until the final 3 months. Then, I want you to focus on making your own techniques. Sounds good. Oh, Fu, I want to teach you something. Naruto said, surprising the other two. Huh, Fu said before Naruto opened up a scroll to reveal water balloons. Water balloons? What could you teach me with these? Fu asked before Naruto held out his hand and created an orb of chakra. What's this? Fu asked, amazed, having never seen such a jutsu before. The Rasengan, it's a jutsu created by my father and an A-rank technique, I want to teach it to you. Fu was surprised he wanted her to learn a jutsu left to him by his father. You would only teach something like this to a student or to someone close enough to be considered family. Fu smiled and thanked Naruto before they began to get ready to train. It would take them another 2 months before they were able to control their fourth tails. Deep in an unknown cave, 9 figures appeared, all their features obscured aside from their eyes. Well, we're all together again. How long's it been? About 2 years. One silhouette who had shark-like eyes asked. So, I guess it's time we finally got started, yeah? Another asked. Yes, have any of you located your targets? The apparent leader, who had purple eyes with 4 concentric rings centered on his pupil said. My target managed to make himself cage, yeah. So I already know where to find him. The Kyuubi Jinchuriki is still with Jiraiya of the Sannin. A red-eyed shadow said with no emotion. Hey, I know where the Yonbi is. I hear he's skilled with the lava style, should be a challenge. The shark-like silhouette stated. Hey, I can't really focus on this. Goes against my religion to take someone alive. Maybe me and Kakuzu would be better off sticking to bounty hunting. I can't stand the bastard's obsession with money, but I get to kill and he gets what he wants. That's not an option, fool. Each of us has one target. The now named Kakuzu said. Hey, I'm just saying. Kakuzu is correct, Hidan. Speaking of whom, Kakuzu, have you located the Nanabi? There was a surprise. The Nanabi was given to my old village. But according to my contact, they gave the Jinchuriki to Konoha to avoid fighting us. Smartest decision they've made in a while. The Nanabi is currently with Jiraiya of the Sannin along with the Kyuubi. Kakuzu said to the surprise of most of the other members. That sounds interesting. How about you take those 2 bitches while I curse the old man? I don't have to break my tenets and we get a 2-for-1 deal. Hidan said confidently. You need to stop underestimating others, Hidan. Jiraiya is out of our league. That is right. You would be unable to kill Jiraiya and there is no telling what the 2 have learned from him. The leader replied, remembering his own training under the Sannin. This news is unwelcome, but it changes little. Originally, the Nanabi was to be first, followed by the Gobi, but we will put off its capture for now. Have any of the other been located? Hidan's target, the Nibi, as well as the Hachibi are in Kumo. Kakuzu said. I haven't located the Sanbi yet. Doesn't have a host, should be an interesting fight. We haven't located the Rokubi either. A shadow with a what appeared to be Venus fly trap coming out of its torso and around its head stated. The leader nodded. They knew the Rokubi Jinchuriki was a missing nin. It was only a matter of time before he was located and he had no affiliation with the villages so they may not even notice his capture. They already knew everything about him, aside from his location. Conan and I will capture the Gobi, the rest of you, continue to secure jobs and funds as you search for information on your targets. The shadows nod and vanish. Soon, peace will arrive. The leader thought before he too vanished.